Good evening, you're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Coming up, Ukraine's push for military aid continues despite major diplomatic summits this week, why the Polish foreign minister says Warsaw has given it all it can. More on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. According to a new poll, 77% of Germans want a change in immigration policy and permanent border controls. 3 years ago, the Taliban took power in Afghanistan, and they now treat women so harshly that it's been called gender apartheid. And this is officially the hottest summer on record, as almost all of Poland struggles with drought. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has met with top European politicians for further talks over the Russian invasion of his country. Ukraine's head of state was aiming to forge closer ties with his allies during a business forum in Italy.
The 50th Ambrosetti International Forum is taking place in northern Italy, with discussions centering around sanctions against Russia, predominantly in the energy and banking sectors. Zelensky addressed the gathering outlining Ukraine's priorities.
Ukrainians want this war to end more than anyone else in the world, but definitely not through the destruction of their nation, their culture, their cities. Russian aggression leaves us with no choice but to fight and defend our lives.
But the event is also an opportunity for bilateral talks. President Zelensky met with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who reassured him of her country's assistance.
The
one thing that cannot happen, gentlemen, is to think that the conflict can be solved by abandoning Ukraine to its fate, because that will not bring peace. It will bring chaos, it will bring wars closer to home, and it will bring many economic consequences, all the more serious than what it costs today to support Ukraine.
Zelensky also attended a meeting with Geert Wilders, the leader of the largest group in the Dutch parliament, who expressed his support for the Ukrainian cause.
A lot of support for Ukraine and for your fight. Once again, I saw your country many times, and what you said yesterday, I just told your staff that people should see what is happening.
Zelensky had met earlier with the US Congress delegation. Their support-garnering talks come at yet another alarming moment for Ukraine and for Europe as a whole. Russia is arming up and Europe needs to react, Ukrainian MP Oleksiy Goncharenko said in an exclusive interview for TVP World.
So I want to see Europe, not speaking now about United States of America, which is also on another side of ocean, but Europe to really ramp up production, to really become strong militarily. Without these, Europe will not survive.
According to a report by the Wall Street Journal, Iran has shipped several hundred short-range ballistic missiles with a range of up to some 800 kilometers, and more such weapons are expected to be delivered to Russia. Ukraine has been struggling with a barrage of drones and missiles, having downed a mere 10% of the Russian-launched weapons between October last year and March this year.
Ukrainian civilians are bearing the brunt of Russia's attacks. Today, 3 people were killed and around a dozen injured, including small children. The remains of a Russian drone also fell near the building of the Ukrainian parliament. For more, let's go live now to our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Chatterjee. Good evening, Oz. What are some of today's most important developments?
Good evening. Well, I was actually awoken by the sound of the large drone attack overnight around 3 a.m. Several massive explosions heard over central Kyiv. And it turns out it was quite a large-scale attack on Ukraine, with the Ukrainian Air Force claiming to have downed 58 of 67 Shahed drones launched at the country last night, with the pictures that you see there showing just how close they came to government buildings there, the debris. You know, it's even though these Shahed drones are slow-moving and are intercepted, the debris can cause huge amounts of damage, death and injury too. Over the last 24-hour period, it's up to 4 dead and over 100 injured in the attacks that have taken place across Ukraine. Now, this goes further. There have been some attacks in Russia today with the Ukrainians targeting the Voronezh region, hitting an ammo dump there, apparently in a drone attack. We've also seen some remarkable scenes in Russia of civilians, local authorities building, constructing bomb shelters inside Russia. Now, I don't think there'll be any joy taken here in Ukraine from seeing these scenes, particularly in Kyiv. But one of the objectives of the Kursk offensive was to bring the war home to Russia. So this is going to be an indication that that is happening. Now, it must be said that these similar bomb shelters were put up in Belgorod about a year ago as well. So they're not a new idea, but the fact that it's becoming normalized, they're expanding this program, goes to show Russia themselves don't think that the war on its territory is about to end anytime soon. And that goes now to the last bit of news, is in the Pokrovsk region. General Syrsky, the Ukraine's commander-in-chief, has spoken today about the operation in Pokrovsk. The Russian advance, he says, has slowed. Zelensky made similar claims last week too, that the British Ministry of Defence didn't seem to back up in their recent statement on the fighting in East Ukraine. However, it must be said that there is some rumours now swirling of a small, minor Ukrainian action in the area. They've moved several brigades there, trying to stabilize the front line. And according to the commander-in-chief of Ukraine, as I said, TVP World can't fact-check these for ourselves, these claims. They're coming from Ukraine's commander-in-chief, but they are saying that the Russian advance in the Pokrovsk region has slowed down and it has lost steam now that the Ukrainians have reinforced those areas, particularly around the settlement of New York that's been hotly contested for many months. That's in the Donetsk Oblast.
Thank you, Oz, and stay safe. That's Oz Kadagi, our Ukraine correspondent from Kyiv. During his trip to the UK, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski has made it clear he thinks the West should deliver more support for Ukraine. He also says Poland has given everything it can to aid Kyiv in its defence efforts. Sikorski says the West should provide Ukraine with effective means to repel Russian attacks as soon as possible. The main such measure is the Patriot air defence system, the presence of which would boost both Ukraine's defence capabilities against missiles and drone strikes, but also the movement of troops on the ground. Sikorski says Poland could have had 8 Patriot systems, but only has 2, as it gave the rest away to Ukraine, a move that other Western countries should follow. The dust might be settling down after last week's historic elections in Saxony and Thuringia, but the anti-immigration rhetoric is set to stay in Germany's political discourse for years to come.
The rise in popularity of anti-immigration parties such as AfD and BSW has forced the ruling coalition to reevaluate its border policy.
We see the turmoil here in Germany and in Thuringia, how many people have turned their backs on democracy. Our mission is to solve the challenges and problems that people have been articulating for years in the areas of migration and energy policy.
A recent survey for public broadcaster ARD shows that 77% of Germans want a different asylum and refugee policy that would curb migration.
I hope we get fewer migrants here because they make me feel a bit unsafe. Of course, not all of them are like that, but most of them are.
Migration for me because it's too much, too many, too much. They get money easily, and meanwhile for our pensioners, pensions and energy prices have to increase. Those are the pressing issues for us.
When I see those foreigners, here a child, there a child, and another child in the womb, they just live at our expense.
Aside from the economic burden, the anti-immigration sentiment is fueled by instances of violent attacks perpetrated by migrants.
As a consequence of Solingen, we must pursue a different policy, one that takes up the fight against violent Islamism, one that declares war on terror. Of course, we have to organize and control migration.
One such event that captured the nation's attention was a mass stabbing event at a unity festival in Solingen. Earlier this week, a 15-year-old Syrian boy involved in the plot to bomb Taylor Swift's Vienna concert was arrested at Frankfurt an der Oder. The 15-year-old is reportedly responsible for the radicalization of the 19-year-old who was planning to attack the stadium in Vienna.
The main suspect admitted that together with two accomplices he wanted to carry out a suicide attack. For that he acquired weapons and explosives, and he carried out other preparations.
The ongoing pressure to curb migration has prompted the ruling coalition to take a tougher approach. At the end of August, Chancellor Olaf Scholz made the decision to resume deportations of criminals of Afghan nationality to their home country. The country is also reportedly looking to send the refugees of Rwanda for processing, in a scheme akin to the UK's failed Rwanda policy.
The European Union is considering suspending Hungary from the Schengen zone, the programme of free movement inside most EU member states. The EU is seeking to counter Hungary's extension of easy access to work permits for Russian and Belarusian citizens.
The government of Prime Minister Viktor Orban has until September 11th to answer the latest letter from EU lawmakers. Brussels wishes to know the answer to two questions. First, why does Hungary consider the extension to Russian and Belarusian citizens necessary and appropriate in the current geopolitical context? Secondly, why does Hungary not apply special security checks on Russian and Belarusian applicants, despite the increased security risks? EU officials argue the extension of the so-called national card, a work permit for foreign citizens, could result in an influx of spies into Europe. According to Professor Andrew Tettenborn, who often comments for TVP World, the pressure on Budapest is more of a political move, rather than an actual fear of Russian agents.
The concern that there is going to be an invasion of Russian spies and saboteurs, I suspect, is overplayed. Because if Russia wants to get spies and saboteurs in, it's not particularly difficult.
The EU hasn't been happy with Hungary in recent months due to Viktor Orban's close ties with Russia. Hungary relies heavily on Russian energy imports and has refused to firmly side with Ukraine since the beginning of the war.
The Taliban's control of Afghanistan has just entered its fourth year. Although media coverage has declined, the humanitarian crisis in the country continues to deteriorate.
In its latest infringement of human rights, the Taliban banned Afghan women from speaking when outside of their homes. With their voices perceived as instruments of vice, women must also not be heard reading aloud or singing.
During these 3 years of Taliban rule in Afghanistan, they've had many plans to eliminate women, starting with closing the schools and universities, then taking work away from women. They want the world to recognize them by forcing women to adapt to their plans.
Although international women rights organizations continue to raise alarm, the plight of Afghan women is no longer an eye-catching headline.
We must continue to invest in Afghan women and girls. Nothing undermines the Taliban's vision for society more than empowering the very part of the population that it seeks to oppress.
In an effort to raise awareness about the suffering of women left behind in Afghanistan, Majina Talash, one of the refugees representing Afghanistan at the Paris Olympics, wore a cape displaying the words "Free Afghan Women," which ended up costing her victory.
It wasn't difficult to sacrifice my victory in the Olympics for this message. It was important to me to send the message with this burqa in the form of wings that represents the possibility for Afghan women to get out with the very difficult means and take flight and free themselves.
The consequences of the Taliban takeover extend to every layer of Afghan society. Shunned by the international community, the country has suffered an economic collapse.
By God, my family spent the last 2 days eating nothing but a kilogram of plain boiled rice.
For us adults, it's okay if we don't have enough to eat for several days. But we cook some rice or soup for the children. We don't let our children die of hunger.
The country was also struck by a series of natural disasters, which further exacerbated its need for humanitarian assistance. UN officials warn that less than 10% of the country's 2024 donation target has been met so far.
And we'll have more on this later in the show as Afghan human rights activist Nilofer Ayobi joins World News Tonight for an exclusive interview. Poland is suffering from drought due to an unusually late heatwave. Our reporter Kazimierz Swiszak has looked into how extreme temperatures are affecting Warsaw, the Polish capital.
The water level of the Vistula River here in Warsaw is almost at the record low, at 27 centimeters. This is due to the massive heatwave swooping across the country. Let's find out how the residents of Warsaw are dealing with these extreme temperatures and if they are a reason for concern. The lowest level of the Vistula River was recorded 9 years ago at 26 centimeters. Jan Szymankiewicz, a hydrologist from the Polish Institute of Meteorology and Water Management, told me the unusual weather conditions are directly the result of climate change.
We are facing a problem with this permanent drought since 2015, and it's going more and more intense, I would say, every single year. So yeah, it's now not a local problem, but all around Europe, I would say.
High temperatures and low water levels have a number of consequences, ranging from shortages in the agricultural sector to problems for hydro plants. The heat also takes a toll on the citizens and their pets, who seek various ways to cool off. I took a stroll down the so-called Vistula Boulevard to ask the residents of Warsaw how they are dealing with the sudden heat wave.
I drink a lot of water when it's really hot.
We eat ice cream when it's hot.
Right. Sprinkle cold water on my head and on my face.
While the warmer weather presents an opportunity to go outside, it's important to stay hydrated and ideally find a bit of shade in order to avoid a heat stroke. The Polish Forestry Services and Fire Department are warning that nearly the entire country is at an extreme risk of wildfires. Extra caution is advised when going camping. According to meteorologists, the waters of the Vistula River could drop to the record low level on Sunday. This is just another symptom of the growing problem of climate change. From Warsaw, TVP World, Kazimierz Swiszak.
The stadium of one of the best teams in the world, Borussia Dortmund, witnessed a farewell game today for its two former Polish stars, Łukasz Piszczek and Kuba Błaszczykowski. A large share of supporters in the stands came from Poland.
With tens of thousands of people in the stadium, Piszczek and Błaszczykowski have bid adieu to their football careers, although they officially hung up their boots in 2021 and 2023 respectively. Former Poland and Borussia player Łukasz Piszczek said ahead of the game that he's grateful for such a farewell opportunity.
Well, yes, we are very happy that Borussia Dortmund gave us this opportunity to say goodbye to the fans in Dortmund. We are happy that so many of the players we played with and the coach with whom we won the most important trophies for Borussia could be here. And we will try to repay all those fans on the pitch with a good game today.
The star-studded lineups included ex-Borussia players, former Poland internationals and friends of both players. But arguably the biggest star will be in the dugout, Jürgen Klopp, the coach who led Błaszczykowski and Piszczek to 2 league titles in the German Bundesliga. Fans were over the moon with the chance to see them all.
The fact that we will see such legends at all, Jürgen Klopp, Piszczek, Błaszczykowski, it is a great event for us. I think for you as well. I also think it will be a great match, such an atmosphere in these stands.
The two Polish players were famous for their exquisite cooperation on the right side of the pitch, with Błaszczykowski playing as a right winger and Piszczek being a right back. This time they played against each other.
Well, it's an unusual situation. Even yesterday after training we were talking that it's a pity we won't be able to play against each other on the wing again, because it's a fun thing and it would be nice to bring back the memories.
But allowing the Polish duo to have their farewell game at Borussia's stadium is a great token of appreciation. ESPN and TVP Sport expert Janusz Michalik had this to say about it in an exclusive interview for TVP World.
It doesn't happen very often that Polish players are recognized in that way, right? I mean, if I have to think, I don't know, the last time we've had such a celebration abroad. for Polish players. We often recognize our former national team players when the national team plays, but for that to happen at such a storied and big club like Borussia Dortmund, I think that's special.
The atmosphere was phenomenal. One of the most celebrated German footballers and ex-Borussia captain Mats Hummels shared a few words in Polish.
Ja umiem po polsku dobrze. Dobrze, dobrze. Jak cię masz? Wszystko dobrze. U ciebie? A, stara bieda. Stara bieda.
And probably the least important part of the game was its final result. At the scoreline, Piszczek's team suffered a 5-4 defeat to the side captained by Błaszczykowski.
3 years have passed since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan. Since then, the country has faced neglected basic services and a crackdown on women's rights. Our next guest, Nilofer Ayobi, knows this better than most. Out of fear for her life, she dressed as a boy for the majority of her childhood so she could go to school. And after building her profile as a humanitarian leader, she had to escape when the Taliban took power again in 2021, arriving here in Poland. And Nilofer Ayobi joins me now in the studio. Good evening.
Good evening.
Nilofer, can I start with a comment you made when the Taliban took over 3 years ago in Afghanistan on social media, and I quote, "I am waiting for my death." What was that like?
Well, that's a tough question, but that's the feeling that I get every day thinking about women in Afghanistan, because I live in every single one of them, including my family back home who are stuck and under Taliban surveillance 24/7. I very clearly remember that with the blink of an eye, the whole world shattered for us, especially for me, because I was one of the very naive one that I thought it's never gonna happen. We will never ever experience Taliban and we will never ever give up. However, I wasn't aware of the politics and the policies of the world, and I couldn't. It didn't make sense for me that the world would betray us like this.
What you experienced during your time in Afghanistan, what your family is experiencing, and what those women back in Afghanistan right now are experiencing. I mean, what does that reality look like for those that don't know?
Well, I'm sure you have heard this gender apartheid word quite a few times in these 3 years, but this is the reality that Afghan women are living in Afghanistan. It's a complete blackout for women. There's no oxygen, no air, no light, nothing for women. If you are a woman, you are not different from a furniture in a corner of a home. And you're there to serve the male society and to produce and reproduce, and that's all. And you have to follow those rules. And as a woman, if you don't have a male in the family, then you're doomed, because you cannot even go out to provide food for yourself and for your children. This is the reality right now.
How is it possible that this is the case still in a country in the 21st century?
Well, thanks to the world, because they went and sat on the negotiation table with the Taliban. They did not listen to the women of Afghanistan. They did not include us in the peace talks, or didn't even consult us properly in the process of peace talks. They only allowed 6 women, and those 6 women were also the sacrificial lambs. And until today, they're to be blamed that, oh, you were part of the 200 plus men delegation, and why didn't you make a change? Of course, 6 women against 200 men from this side and a couple of hundred from the Taliban side. It's always a lose-lose for women of Afghanistan. And today, when I'm sitting here with you and talking to you about the situation back home in country, my nieces are suffering, my cousin sisters are suffering, my family is suffering, and 20 million women are suffering back home.
How hard is that, being away from your family? And you're here in Poland, but they're not. And like you say, they're suffering under this regime.
Well, imagine you are born in a culture in a country that you have never been away from the family. You have always been surrounded with that family. You have always had that support of the family. And now suddenly, since 3 years, I'm on my own. My children hasn't been able to, be near to the grandparents, to meet their aunts, their cousins. It's like suddenly we are orphans, even though I have a family living there, but I'm living as an orphan here, and my children are like orphans in this country. Of course, I'm not ungrateful. We have great Polish friends and support here, but family is family. And this is the situation for many, many other women in exile.
It's now been 3 years since the Taliban returned to power. You mentioned the global response. Do you feel like the international community has been turning a blind eye?
Well, I'm sure that they are turning a blind eye, because from the moment we arrived, we managed to, to survive and be saved in countries. We started advocating. You see us on each and every platform sacrificing our opportunities. For example, you saw Manija in the Olympics, that she sacrificed her whole career just to send a message to the international community that free Afghan women, but in response she was disqualified from the Olympics. So this is the response from the international community. While Taliban issued the Sharia law, at the same time Germany sent some ultimatum to the embassy, Afghan embassies in Germany, said we have to close you down, and then we will have the consulate, to continue the work, because of course the consulate has to work with the Taliban. So this is a kind of slowly we are being erased from inside and outside, and this is what has outraged us, that our allies have betrayed us.
And allies have said we're outraged too, but you've previously used the line, peace requires action. So what type of action do you think would genuinely make a difference?
Well, we want the international community to take Taliban to the ICC, ICJ, to international criminal courts, not invite them to Geneva and to the events and, throw a red carpet for us. That red carpet is for Afghan women, not for the ones who are suppressing and oppressing them, right? But what we are seeing here is that Taliban is way faster than the international community. They codified the Sharia law while the international community is still contemplating whether we should, codify the term gender apartheid or not, whether we should listen to the Afghan women or not. So we need actions. We are done with this statement. We are done with the outrageous, tweets. The tweets doesn't save women in Afghanistan. If it would have, I have tweeted 1 million times. Do you see any difference in the lives of women in Afghanistan? No. We want action.
On the use of gender apartheid, why is it so important that that term is formally recognised as a crime against humanity?
See, if we go under term gender apartheid, we can bring the Taliban leader, because he is issuing the edicts, condemning 20 million women. But if we go under gender persecution, here's the trick, that under gender persecution we cannot go, after the big sharks. We have to go and waste our time for the smaller, lower ranked people. Of course they are to be blamed, but the main culprit here is Mullah Haibatullah, the leader who's issuing these edicts, the leader who all these Taliban follow and listen to. So he is the one we want to bring in the International Criminal Court of Justice, not just some, clerks or random person in the system. This is not what we want. We want justice, and we want the leaders to come in this court and to be judged.
Human rights activist Nilofer Ayobi, thank you so much for your time. All the best to you and to your family.
Thank you so much.
And that's World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.